Welcome to RealGM Radio. Dan Devine from Yahoo Sports is here. I'm Wes Goldberg. We're predicting the top 10 offenses in the NBA next season. Let's jump in. Thanks for jumping on to RealGM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg, longtime NBA writer who's written for The Ringer, RealGM, Miami Herald, San Jose Mercury News, and more. I also host the Locked On Heat and Locked On NBA podcasts. Thanks for listening and subscribing on your favorite podcast app. If you don't know, we are also now on YouTube, so please subscribe and like the podcast over there, RealGM Radio on YouTube. A reminder, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Joining me today is the prolific NBA scribe at Yahoo Sports, a writer who could turn around 3,000 words on a finals game by the morning and always have a way to point something out that I didn't notice or think about before. It's Dan Devine. Dan, how's New York?
It's good. We might have the editorial police coming in from the window over here. I have the 3,000 word files. I gotta chill out with that. The bosses are not stoked on all of those.
I can't even imagine.
Also, it's funny you bring up prolific. As we are talking, I just wrote the first thing that I had written in a month, and I was like, why do I do this? Like, it's bad. It takes a long time. It's hard. And,
right.
Who among us even knows if it's landing anywhere? You're throwing a bottle into the ocean and finding out if anybody cares about it. But we're going to get back toward being prolific. We're going to get back toward thinking about the NBA training camp start at the end of the month. And I loved this exercise. This was a lot of fun. You give me homework. I'm a homework kid. So this works out well for me. I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to having this discussion.
I didn't do homework growing up. I did only the homework that I was interested in. And I think that's why I do what I do now, is because I can't have a real job. And like you said, writing is really hard. The hardest thing about writing is all of it. All of it is hard. The beginning, the middle, and the end. All of it's difficult.
I don't know, man. It's not laying brick. We got to fall back a little bit, right? Like I got to remember when I'm complaining about how difficult it is to fill up the empty page. Like other people are working for a living.
I'm like, how do I write about this orange circle going through the red circle in a different way than other people are doing it? Like
right.
It's not terribly it's not yeoman's work. But the assignment that you alluded to, we are going to do the unprecedented thing of trying to predict the top 10 offenses in the league next season. Now, I don't know about you, Dan. The way that I thought about this was we have top 10 offenses and offensive rating every year. I'm kind of viewing it through the scope of offensive rating. Who's going to be number one in offensive rating? Who's going to be number 10? Did you kind of went about it the same way?
Yeah. So the starting point for me is like, I mean, we know, more points, good, right? But also we have to understand teams play at different paces. Some teams are looking to fast break all the time. Some teams are looking to grind it down. So it's just, how much are you exerting or exercising from a possession? How much are you getting out of each trip down the floor? And I don't know about you. When I started looking at it, and you can kind of cross reference like possession counts are a little bit different on, cleaning the glasses stats, strip out garbage time, right?
Right.
And NBA.coms are a little bit different than Basketball Reference. So I did a little bit of that, but generally speaking, the top 10 were the top 10 from last season, at least, in some shifting in order, 1, 5 here, 7 there, that kind of thing. But I think the thing that I found that I was really struck by, and I'm interested if you found that, looking at last year's top 10, I was like, it might not be dramatically different. Like a lot of the offenses that I thought were really good last year, maybe this is just recency bias checking in. I was like, I kind of think most of these are going to be real good next year. And if not, locks in this top 10, pretty close to it.
Yeah, I think I was looking through and I kind of had the same takeaway is I feel like there's a very clear difference between the good offenses and the bad ones, right? I know these teams score points when they want to, and these teams it's a real uphill climb for this other group. And I think a big part of that too is this offseason didn't result in as much big changes and player movement as I think a lot of people anticipated that it might. And so given that the league is pretty stagnant in terms of, we know what these teams are already. We've seen so many of these teams for the most part the way that they were last year. Maybe it's not going to change. I think the order is going to change a little bit. I do have a few teams dropping out of the top 10 and a couple other ones sneaking in. Mm-hmm. But let's just jump right in. I have some honorable mentions. 4 teams that I couldn't quite get into the top 10, even though I kind of wanted to find a place for them. Well, basically, and just to kind of set up the show here, we'll go. You have your list. I have my list. I'll kind of go off of my list because it's a little bit easier, and then you
Sure.
can just like jump in and just be like, I had that team higher, I didn't have that team, whatever.
Great.
But honorable mentions, and I'm interested to see if any of these made your top 10. I have the Warriors, the Lakers, the Knicks, and the Hawks. I couldn't find a way to get those teams into my top 10. I had the Warriors there because they're always a top 10 offense with Steph Curry and Steve Kerr. I looked at the other teams that some of these other offenses. I'm like, yeah, I think these other offenses are going to be better. The Lakers were fourth in offensive rating after the All-Star break last year. JJ Redick is going to prioritize that end of the basketball, so still just couldn't talk myself into putting the Lakers in the top 10 for a whole season. I had the Knicks falling out of my top 10. They were seventh last year in offensive rating, but they were also second in the league in second chance points. And with Isaiah Hartenstein leaving, I think that's just going to be a big blow to them. And I'm not really sure how they're going to score that consistently. And then the Hawks, I had them as an honorable mention just because they always seem to be in the top 10 with Trae Young. They were 12th last year. They were outside the top 10 by a fourth of a point per 100 possessions. So they're right on the cusp of making the top 10. But at the end of the day, I couldn't get those four teams into my top 10. Did any of them make your top 10?
I had the Knicks at 10, which is a little bit of a shrug and throw your hands up. I mean, they were seventh last year, second the year before that. I think your Hartenstein point is exactly right on. Like, I'm very curious about what the sort of structure and formation of the offense is without him in the picture, because if the Knicks don't go get another 7-footer, and they're right now the center room looks like Mitchell Robinson coming off of surgery and myriad injury issues that he's had over the past few years. They bring back Precious Achiuwa, maybe small ball 5, more of a 4, but I think has been most successful when they've played him at 5. Jericho Sims, who's a depth option. You don't really want to be in the Jericho Sims business if you can avoid it. And they have not made a move to bring in another center. So the question for me is, they bring back Julius Randle. And I think he's one of the most interesting players in the league because I think they dramatically missed his shot creation. In their record, it did not show up because Jalen Brunson stood on his head for 2.5 months. But when Jalen Brunson left the floor last year during the regular season after Julius Randle's injury, the Knicks scored 102 points per 100 possessions. They had an offense that would have been dead last in the NBA when Brunson left the floor. Those are minutes where earlier in the season, Randle gets to run the show, maybe, pound the rock in the post, create some shots for other guys. I think there's a role for him as a offensive, flotation device in non-Brunson minutes. And I think if you don't start or bring another center in, if you don't have 2 7-footers that you're playing regularly that you feel comfortable with, there is now at least a pathway with Mikal Bridges in, with the wings on the roster, with OG Anunoby back, with Randle there, to playing some version of OG and Randle as combo 4-5s in a small but thick and strong and brawny small ball 5 look. And that's not, it feels like anathema for a Tom Thibodeau team, but the possibility of getting 5 shooters, multiple ball handlers and shot creators on the floor with some event creating defenders. I can see a world where there's multiple ways for the Knicks to generate high value offense with Randle and OG and those wings on the floor. I'm not saying I think it's for sure, but I think we've seen enough from what the high end version of the Brunson, Anunoby, Hart, DiVincenzo, whatever that group can look like offensively. We saw 10 or 12 games with Randle in the picture there where that looked awesome before the injury set up. So, and the possibility of a new way to generate more looks, I think that it still could work out there. I think that I don't think they're a slam dunk going to be top 5, but I think they're going to be on that fringes. So I put them at 10, just in deference to this is now 2 straight years they've been a top 10 offense, and I think they got more ways to skin the cat this year.
The Knicks were the hardest team for me to leave out of my top 10 because of all the things you're saying. There's a world right where they have the 5-out offense. And the thing that Tom Thibodeau does, and we don't really associate Tom Thibodeau with analytics or even 3-point shooting, but he talked a lot about 3-point shooting and getting up a certain amount of shots last year. It kind of went under the radar, but it was a big part of New York's offense last year. And now you have just more of these guys. You get a full year of Julius Randle, who's presumably healthy. There's a world where this turns into a top 10 offense. This still is a top 10 offense. But for them to be a top 10 offense, they almost have to do it in a different way than they did it last year when they were a top 10 offense. And so that's why I had them on the cusp, and I ultimately couldn't get them in. It's just because I want to believe that it's going to work, but until I see it, I can't, I guess. But
Right.
it wouldn't be at all shocking to me if they ended up cracking the top 10. But the team that was 10th on my list was actually the LA Clippers. I had the Clippers 10th.
Okay.
And I hate it. I hate that I have them here. I have two rules about the NBA. Never watch the Hornets after February, and never believe in the Clippers. And this isn't necessarily like me promoting my belief in the Clippers necessarily, but I do think that they're going to be a really good offense. Everybody focuses on them losing Paul George, but they were fourth in offensive rating last year. They have a full year of James Harden now. It was almost a full year last year, but James Harden running that pick and roll. Everything we're hearing from Ty Lue is that they're going to lean even more into that. That's efficiency done. Like, it's just an automatic. James Harden running your offense has tended to be, even at this age, a very good offense. They had a 121.7 offensive rating with James Harden on the court last year. You take James Harden on the court, take Paul George off the court, it was still an offensive rating of 117.7. Obviously, that's a smaller sample size than a whole season, but the Clippers have enough guys who could shoot. They have enough forms of efficient offense between James Harden and Kawhi Leonard when he's healthy that I just think that they're going to crack the top 10, so I have them 10th.
They were one of the teams that I had falling out, and okay. The big reason is the thing you just said. They've got a lot of ways to create shots when Kawhi Leonard's healthy. And Kawhi Leonard last season played 68 games in 2,330 minutes. I'm not a betting person, but if I was, I would not bet on that happening again, if for only because, sorry, again, you hear the take police coming for me out here. Both of those figures, his games played and his minutes played, his highest since 2016-17. Whether it's because of injuries or because of load management, you're just not going to get a whole lot of Kawhi Leonard, generally speaking. And then what you're looking at is, how do we generate consistent offense? Should I just stop doing this and go back, or are we...
No, we're good. Just
All right.
Let the take police come get you.
Incredible. Wonderful stuff between why not live in Brooklyn between the constant sirens, the constant construction, concrete jungle where dreams are made up. All right. You've got, if Kawhi Leonard is available for 70 games in 2,400 minutes, great, fantastic. Then you're laughing. In the absence of that, or in the potential that that's not going to be the case, now you're looking at it's Harden. And yes, there are enough guys who can shoot on that team. Between, bring back Nicholas Batum, you have, oh my God, now I can't remember his name.
Norman Powell.
Yes, thank you. Also, sorry to Norman Powell that A, I forgot him, and that B, when I said I can't remember his name, the first guy you thought of was Norman Powell as a forgettable player. But Terrence Mann into a larger role. There are multiple players who can knock down shots on that team. I have some doubts about where the shot creation is coming from. And I think that's where you look at like Paul George as a guy who just sort of fits into every nook and cranny an offense needs. He was second on the Clippers in scoring last year, fourth in assists, first in threes made and attempted, second in free throws made and attempted. He actually led the team in usage rate. And if you look at offensive estimated plus minus, dunks and threes, he led the team in that. That's more of like a by possession, impact metric. And none of the talent that they replaced him with, or none of what else is there, is commensurate with that level of production. And so I have some questions about, yes, maybe a version of Kawhi Leonard or maybe a version of James Harden rather, that is going to be leaned into more, and we are going to run more pick and roll with him. The ball is going to be in his hands more often. Maybe that does generate, as you mentioned, that sort of like high end, near top of the league level of efficiency. But the last couple times we've seen it, he was doing that flanked by Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, Joel Embiid, and then Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And I think removing George from that, and then maybe Kawhi, I think it introduces more question marks for me there. Like the 2 years before last season, they were bottom 10 as opposed to fourth or fifth, right? So I think if you're dealing with a not all that level of availability Kawhi season, there's more of a potential for it to drop down. Maybe not all the way down to bottom 10 with Harden in the fold, but like more middle of the pack. So for me, I looked at that and said, that's a stay away for me.
You're right. The Clippers are just like I said, they're forever stay away. You stay away. I won't believe that they can win the championship until they're actually holding the trophy, right? They could be up 15 in the fourth quarter, up 3-0 in the NBA finals. And I'm like, I don't know.
I believe,
we're one bum hamstring away from this whole crumbling down. But this is how we sort of enter the pitfalls of like rankings and radio segments, because you and I are essentially saying the same thing.
Yes.
We had the clip, like they were 4th in offensive rating last year. They lose Paul George. They are going to tumble down the offensive rating rankings a little bit. I have them kind of on 10th. It sounds like you have them closer to like 11th, 12th, 13th. It's essentially the same thing. Yeah. So we're basically doing the same thing, except they're in my top 10 and they're out of your top 10.
Yes.
And the Knicks are in your top 10 and they're out of my top 10. So now I'm the Knicks hater and you're the Clippers hater, even though we basically are saying the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, and we're talking about like tenths of hundreds of points or whatever, right? Like it's vanishingly small differences, but we've got to stand on these takes and yell at each other. That's what we need to do.
Sports screaming.
Exactly.
I've got the Sacramento Kings 9th.
Okay.
All right. So did they make your top 10?
They did not.
Okay.
But I don't have a great reason for that as much as it's like, they were at, we were talking about these teams that are kind of on the cusp. I think they were 14th, 13th in a lot of these sort of ratings last year. Dunks and threes, which the adjusted offensive ratings and defensive ratings for like the strength of your competition, I believe had them at 11th or 12th. So they were like right on that cusp. I think my last picture in my brain of the Kings was like a slightly higher end offense and a more balanced defense after they moved to Keon Ellis in the starting lineup without Kevin Huerter there. Like I'm looking at them and thinking like their path they might be looking to find the levels evening out a little bit. So that was why to me, I was like, I wonder if they're more like a 13th and 12th kind of team, if that's as opposed to like where they used to be for so long, where it was, we're going to aim for 1, 2, 3, and then be 26, 27, 28. I think they're kind of meeting in the middle for me, but I'd love to hear more about why you think that they're going to be up there. They're going to vault up a little bit more this year.
Yeah, I still think we're trying to figure out who the Sacramento Kings are, right? Because under Mike Brown now with the De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis build, but they were number 1 in offensive rating 2 years ago. They were closer to the middle of the pack last year. I think ultimately they're probably in the middle of, they're not the best offense in the league. I think they're better than like 13th, 14th, 15th also. Right. 3-point shooting didn't help them last year. They had an abnormally low year in 3-point shooting percentage. I think that bumps up a little bit just because that tends to happen, and that sort of boosts their offensive rating a little bit. I just think that there's so much talent on offense, and based on what they did this offseason, I agree with you. It seems like Mike Brown was like, let's sacrifice some offense to get a little bit better on defense, but I do wonder if this offseason might have suggested in them getting DeMar DeRozan, bringing back Malik Monk. Does that suggest, let's just punt on being an awesome defense. Let's just be an awesome offense and kind of go back to what they were 2 years ago. I just think there's too much talent on offense between De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, who is very efficient, Malik Monk, who presumably will only get better this year. This is more of like a talent play and a fact that I know what this is going to look like offensively, and I feel pretty good about it. They just have so many options. Keegan Murray, another year, he presumably gets better. This is just me banking on the Kings' talent. They're 9th. So
I like that as an idea, especially because this is like what you're doing there is sort of like a sound, sensible investment, right? That's like I'm putting a certain amount of my salary from each check into a savings account. It might be like a low yield bond, but I think it's gonna stand the test of time, which is a weird way to talk about the Sacramento Kings, I will grant. But I like that especially because I am about to go the other way and be like, this is like some to the moon nonsense that I'm about to project.
If you want to make a memory, you got to go to Game Time. All right. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you all the incredible deals and the great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of seats. You've got the super deal. Don't forget about the super deal. And curated deals, they make it easier to find the best price on great seats. And I think this is so cool is when you click on the ticket, right? You go to the app. If you want to go to a game in Boston, you want to go to a game in New York or Philadelphia, whatever, you go to the city and you click on the game you want to go to. And then they just show you a great, easy to read layout of the stadium. And then you click on the seat you want. And then you get a view of the seat right from there. Boom. You know what you're buying. So you get seat views before you buy, and they have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation, protection, job loss. It's terrific. So toggling here with the Game Time app. Now this feature shows the total upfront, no surprise fees at checkout, so you know what you're dealing with. You don't click on the button after and you go, wait a minute, what's that extra $20 for? Also, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference for the lowest price guarantee. They have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you up to 100% of the difference. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Number 9 for me is the Charlotte Hornets.
No. Okay. All right. Let's do it. Okay.
Who you will not be watching after February, which is a shame because you're going to be missing some fireworks. All right. Hear me out. Go with me here. Be with me for a moment.
Bring me down this path. Let's do it.
So the last time you had this is essentially I think LaMelo Ball is going to be healthy argument.
That's the bet. Yeah.
The bet here is you are going to get a full or most of a full season of LaMelo Ball. The last time you had one of those, they were 6th in offensive efficiency, where you had LaMelo with Miles Bridges and a structure in place, essentially. Terry Rozier was there. There were some other guys that are there that are not there anymore. This is a bet on you get a healthier version of LaMelo with the increase in shot frequency, 3-point shot frequency, the accuracy that he can bring to bear, a little bit more growth and development in terms of like his strength, his ability to get into the lane, finish, some growth and advancement in terms of his play. You bring in, a second year for Brandon Miller, who in a larger role than maybe anybody wanted him to have last year, looked like a perfect fit connective tissue piece, the kind of guy who it makes sense for him to say Paul George is my GOAT because he's the kind of do everything 3 that fits in a lot of different builds. You have him next to Bridges in the front court. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of their center room. Like Mark Williams, when he's been healthy, has been a really interesting player and somebody who's been an efficient sort of glass crashing lob threat kind of pick and roll big. Nick Richards can do that as well. I think they've got like the mix of a low wattage but efficient screen and roll bigs game. And I'm kind of buying the idea that you bring in Charles Lee as the new head coach. He comes from that Celtics system where the idea was we want to space the floor, we want to play fast, we want to jack up threes, we want to make everybody kind of a threat to do a little bit of everything. That roster, let's put it charitably, is not the Celtics roster. But I think if you are able to say we get a full healthy season out of LaMelo Ball, he's the kind of playmaker that can open up and lift the floor for some of these other guys. That plus growth for Brandon Miller, plus maybe some more production out of the center rotation there. I think there's just the last time we saw, for better or for worse, the last time we saw healthy LaMelo with a full season of Miles Bridges, that was a top 6 offense. So I think that the fundamentals are there to at least put them in the conversation. And now I will spread my arms out and wait for the roasting that is about to come my way. But this is one of those, it's September. If I'm right about this, I'm a genius. And if I'm wrong about this, no one cares because I'm going to be wrong about 6,000 other things between now and April. But that's why I'm putting it on wax right now. What do you think?
First of all, kids, this is podcasting 101. This is excellent podcasting. This is a great take. We're around the 20-minute mark, and you're like, how about the Charlotte Hornets?
That's
we got a
exactly
surprise.
right.
I wanted air horns. This is a masterclass, Dan. So I appreciate it. And you know what? You kind of talked me into it a little bit. I love Charles Lee and what he's going to bring to this thing. Everything that he's saying in the media about he wants to play 5 out, they want to get the 3-point shots up, and all these things. If the Hornets crash the top 10 offensive rating party, I think it's going to look a lot like a college basketball team where it's basically the coach and the system is sort of the driving force behind everything. And obviously, if you get a full LaMelo Ball healthy season, that's the engine also. But my biggest thing with the Hornets is, okay, but who's shooting the threes? Who's LaMelo Ball kicking it out to? Who's he passing to? There is no Terry Rozier. There's not even a Gordon Hayward like there was a few years ago. I love Brandon Miller. I'm a big Brandon Miller guy. I think we are due for another good LaMelo Ball year. I just kind of feel like we're due for one healthy season from him. If we get one healthy year out of every 3 with LaMelo, then this is probably it,
Yeah.
So there's pieces that I like here. It's a great take. I'm not gonna rain on your Hornets parade. I'm not gonna do it. You know what? If they are here, I promise I'll watch a couple of games of them after February. I promise I will.
But the reason to rain on it, as you look, it's like, well, who's shooting the threes? And I'm like, oh well, I have some good answers for you, my man. Josh Green, Cody Martin, Grant Williams. I'm like, question mark? I don't know. Maybe we get Seth. We are able to dust off Seth Curry, get him in the mix a little bit more. Maybe that's what does it. But I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Like the where the rubber meets the road on someone actually taking the shots. That's a little bit of a tough sell for me, but I think they're going to be there. And, you know, listen, fortune favors the bold. All the cryptocurrency magnates told me that for a long time, and I'm going to start believing them today. Charlotte Hornets, the cryptocurrency of the 24-25 NBA season.
Dogecoin Hornets. I love it. All right. So with the Hornets fireworks over, I'm going to go number 8 on my list. I've got the Milwaukee Bucks here. A little bit more conventional. This team just always tends to be in the top 10 in offensive rating. They were 6th last year, despite all the turmoil, getting Damian Lillard there late, the 3 different coaches in 4 weeks or whatever it was. You're getting a full year of Giannis and Dame now. You got additions like Gary Trent Jr. and Torian Prince off the bench, who I think are going to help. I'm going to just go ahead and assume, and this might be a mistake on my end, maybe a little bit healthier of a season from Chris Middleton, who obviously is really important to this team. But at the end of the day, this is just a bet on Giannis is so efficient. You put him and Dame together. They were still 6th in offensive rating last year, despite all the stuff that went wrong. And I have them even dropping here a little bit, but that's more of, I think, teams moving up. But I feel whether it's 8th or so, I feel pretty good about them being in my top 10 somewhere.
I would agree. I had them a couple spots higher at 6th. And yeah, I mean, this is one of those, it becomes more difficult to bet on health the older a core gets. And the Bucks are going to be one of the oldest teams in the NBA. But if you're assuming, you know, whatever the discomfort, and there was apparently both on-court and off-court discomfort for Damian Lillard moving from Portland, also going through some things in his personal life, you assume that is sort of in the rear view. There's a little bit more stability there. If you get more than 55 games from Chris Middleton, and also a lot of those games were on a minutes restriction as well, so you really weren't getting the full complement of him. That big 4, right, with Brook Lopez added in, when they only played 677 minutes last year, 126 offensive rating. Like, and most of the versions of that, like you had Giannis, Brook, Dame with no Middleton on, that's like 120. So there's still a lot of pathways to efficient point production because, as it turns out, you have Giannis on the floor, you're probably going to score a lot of points very efficiently because he's going to shoulder block 9 people out of the way and dunk. But I think you're right there. I think even if you're, say, a skeptic of Doc Rivers' overall impact, he has generally presided over some really good offenses and a whole lot of offensive talent and found ways to sort of cleanly move guys out of the way. I think their minimums are going to be fascinating, although we said that about Phoenix last year and that didn't work out so hot for us. So maybe Phoenix will come up a little bit later in the top 10 too. And in fact, now that I look at my list, maybe right now I had the Phoenix Suns at number 8.
Okay.
And they are one that I'm in my homework doc here. It's like, who do you have questions about? And the Suns were one of them, because on one hand, the offense was awesome when their big 3 guys were on the court last year. I think it was like a 123 offensive rating when Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal played together. Obviously, Durant and Booker coming off sensational runs for Team USA this summer. So there's the general feeling of like maybe they hit the ground running, a bit, which Booker did at the beginning of last season too. I remember both me and Michael Pina wrote about like, point Book, is he like one of the best point guards in the NBA? And then immediately got hurt because there's a ringer curse and a Dan Devine curse. And when you combine those things, it's really ugly for everybody that we write about. But the idea, like, year full of reps, even the lineups that weren't great, like which were mostly Bradley Beal infused lineups, like if you had Booker and Beal on and KD off, or KD and Beal on and Booker off, like they were average. But when you think about it, if you've got multiple ways to be elite and then a few things that were like average in an ecosystem that didn't work out altogether great under Frank Vogel last year, sounded like there was maybe some messages not getting through in terms of 3-point volume, in terms of the way they wanted to play. That's like a baseline now, in theory. You bring in Mike Budenholzer, who, as you mentioned, with those Bucks teams that were consistently high-end offenses, one of the big things that was one of his sort of core principles was we're going to space the floor, we're going to jack up a ton of threes. They were always up near the top of the league in three-point attempt rate. Whether that translates with going from Brook Lopez as a stretch 5 to Yusuf Nurkic as a stretch 5 remains to be seen. But I like that they've sort of addressed some of the issues they had last year, in part They were a terrible turnover team. I think they were 25th in turnover rate last year. In comes Tyus Jones. In comes Monty Morris. If nothing else, those guys will not turn the ball over. And I like the idea of them as sort of high floor, low turnover. We're going to get something out of this possession. And if you're going to get something out of most possessions, and the lineups include Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and then Bradley Beal in what you'd have to imagine is a year where he's going to be looking to bounce back in a big way, given the way it ended and how summarily he got like his pants pulled down by Anthony Edwards in that sweep. I think there's a pathway to a pretty to really good offense. 8 might wind up being low if they get those guys healthy. I think that's also the concern, though.
So I agree everything you said on Phoenix, and I actually do have them finishing a lot higher. I have them third. I think they're going to have the third best offense in the league. So the key thing, you already hit on it, was the turnover rate. They threw away so many possessions last year. And when you talk about offensive rating, you're talking about efficiency, obviously. You're talking about maximizing some of these possessions that they were, again, just throwing away. I think the inclusion of Tyus Jones and Monty Morris, who have some of the best assist to turnover ratios in the modern NBA era, this is a little bit kind of like what I was talking about with the Sacramento Kings, if kind of going by like what they did, their actions over the offseason. What does that mean about how I think they're going to play? I think Phoenix, I have some concerns about going smaller with Tyus Jones in lineups with basically Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal as your forwards or whatever it's going to be. But one thing I don't have a concern, they're going to put up points. They're going to score a lot. And I think that's the idea, is very similar. Like, look, we're just never going to be that good defensively no matter what. So let's just maybe be the best darn offensive team you've ever seen. I don't have them being number 1, but I do have them being number 3 here, because if you just clean up those throwaway possessions, they were so bad. And you're already 20, like bottom 5 in the league in turnover rate. I think that's going to completely flip this year. I love Mike Budenholzer in terms of a guy who creates an offensive system, right? Like the same thing. He is so strict with his offensive systems that his rigidness is what got him fired from Milwaukee, but it's also a big reason why they were so successful under him in Milwaukee also. And so I think that's going to help Phoenix. I think they're going to have a very clear system. Mike Budenholzer is the guy who tapes squares on the practice court and says, stand here, take threes from here. My biggest question with Phoenix is, and Mike Budenholzer there, is, will it work? Can he get vets like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, who prefer to dribble their way into mid-range shots and make it look pretty? Can he get them to buy into, it doesn't have to look awesome, it doesn't have to be art, we have to be more science than art. That's how we're gonna win a lot more games, and that's how we're gonna be a better offense this year. I do think that he's gonna get them to buy in. I think that after last year and how disappointing it was, they'll say, look, this guy's won a championship, this guy has done it, let's just trust the process here. So all that said, I think they buy in. I think they stay relatively healthy. I think Tyus Jones and Monty Morris help the offense be a lot more efficient. And then you've already, like, once you've got the ball and you're being more efficient and you're not throwing away possessions, you're not turning the ball over, and you're getting good looks, if those good looks are coming from Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, it's just really hard to be bad offensively. And so I've got them 3. I think they're going to take a huge leap.
That is a little rich for my blood, if for only because the downside, and this is not like satisfying analysis, I'll grant you that. It's not nearly as satisfying as my Hornets analysis. Are you really getting 75 games and 2,800 minutes out of KD again, right? It's sort of a replication of the Kawhi point. Bradley Beal famously has not played more than 60 games in 5 years. Booker actually quietly has played 70 games once since 2016. And he's had hamstring and ankle issues the last couple of years, some calf stuff, some groin injury. Like, which is not to say that, like, well, unfortunately, on the right side of 30, Devin Booker is cooked. RIP to a real one. But like, it's something to be mindful of, especially because, as we said, the versions of the team that functioned best last season were the ones where Booker was involved. Like when he was off and Beal was the second guy, like that was where it got a little more shaky. But generally speaking, I feel like we think of that team last season as such a disappointment because of like wins to dollar spend and because of the, all of the Matt Ishbia blow through the second apron of it all. And then you sort of zoom out and you get a little bit of distance from it. And you're like, 49-win team that was 9th on offense and 12th on defense. And got swept in the first round of the playoffs, but by a team that went to the conference finals and beat the defending champions. Like maybe they weren't as awful as we thought. which is also an argument for like maybe Frank Vogel didn't need to get fired. But if you're going to replace Frank Vogel, why not with like Vogel Plus, which sounds like a really bad streaming service. But like maybe that's sort of what Coach Bud does for them, is like, we can like, he's maybe not always the most imaginative coach, but like everyone does what they're supposed to do all the time.
Right.
What if that, but better? And so, yeah, I think it's a strong argument. And if you get good health from those guys, and more than, 41 games where all three of them played together, if that goes up to 50 something, 60, whatever, most of the season, you could absolutely be right.
I've got the Denver Nuggets next.
Okay.
So where is that? 7th? I've got them 7th, which it's not a big departure from where they've been. They've generally been a top 6 team. Yeah. They've never been lower than 6 in offensive rating over the last 3 years at least. But I've got them finishing 7th here, and that's just more of my questions about their 3-point shooting. They lose Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who is more of a higher volume 3-point shooter, obviously a very efficient 3-point shooter. Is Christian Brown, are these guys going to be able to make up some of that stuff? Is the Russell Westbrook experiment going to work? Is that going to boost their second unit? Is that going to kind of be a weird sort of turd in the Denver Nuggets punch bowl kind of thing, as we kind of see the Russell Westbrook experience turn into sometimes? But Nikola Jokic, he's too good. There's Jamal Murray, re-signed extension, too good. That 2-man game's too good. I'm betting on Jamal Murray being fine. By the way, I think, the reports of Jamal Murray's demise have been greatly overstated. I think once he gets healthy, he'll be fine. This is a bet on Nikola Jokic. And Jokic, by the way, unlike Kawhi Leonard, unlike Bradley Beal, that guy's a tank. That guy plays games. That guy's always out there. So the personnel loss of like the talent drain over the last couple of years, I have them sliding a little bit, but not by a lot.
Completely defensible. I mean, they've been a top 10 offense for 8 years running now, which not coincidentally, that's who I think not long after Jokic went into the starting lineup. Top 5 in 5 of those 8 years, including 4 of the last 5 and the last 2. So a little bit of slippage you lose KCP, you're going to have to sort of piece it together with Christian Brown. And I think a guy to watch there, this is not necessarily a revelation, because I think a lot of people are on him, is Julian Strawther. Yeah. For no other reason. I mean, obviously the talent coming out of Gonzaga, people were excited about, but structurally, like, as you mentioned, that the 3-point attempt rate for the Nuggets, they were about above league average in 2021-22. 38% of their shots came from 3. Down to 32.9 in the year they won the title, down to 32.3 last year, and that was dead last in the league. So you go from the middle of the pack a couple of years ago to dead last in the league. Strawther, if nothing else, puts them up. He only played, I think, like 500 or 600 minutes last year, but 9 attempts per 36 in summer league. A couple of games this year, he clearly had the edict of, hey, jack shots. I think he took 22 in 2 games in summer league. So if he's in the game, not to blow anybody's scouting reports out of the water, probably keep a body near him, because he's probably he's going to shoot it as soon as he gets into his hands. And so I think that's going to be interesting to monitor as the year goes on. Like, if Christian Brown gets off to a slow start offensively, which he did last year and was a challenge for him as he went along, do they just need Strawther to be playing more minutes in a larger role because they need that space? Like, Jokic as a playmaker just yearns to be playing in more space. And the Jokic-Murray 2-man game, which was, has been the bane of every defense's existence for a decade, it's not easy to stop in any capacity. It gets a little easier to stop when you can like sink in and try to cut off the pocket passes, and like you're hugging in off the wings because you're not as worried about the shooters that are stationed in the slots there, or in the ball going ping and getting around to like Russ in the corner, for example, or whatever. So I think, the general principle of as long as Jokic is there, they're going to be a top 10 offense. And actually, I wrote about them in writing about the Murray extension a couple days ago. And this bonkers of like consistency of this is wild. So you go back to 2019-20 when they made their bubble run. When Jokic and Murray play together, they're 185 and 90 over a 5-year span. And their offensive rating in 6,000 minutes with those guys on the court together is 123.5. So like they are essentially the best offense in the league over 5 straight years when they got those 2 guys on the court together. I think you're well within your rights to say that even with some other concerns, that battery is going to keep fueling them moving forward.
Did you have them in your top 10?
Yeah, I had him a couple spots up. I had him at 5, just again, which is essentially, again, like a little bit of a shrug. Like, I don't know that there's a dramatic difference in terms of what I expect from them and, say, Milwaukee. But that's more like in deference to the superstar talent at the top of it, even if I have some concerns about how it fills in around it, that seemed about right to me.
I am really the Strawther point you made is such a great one, and I'm really interested to watch the Nuggets, particularly like the first couple of weeks of the season, and just say and just to say, okay, who's taking them? Because Michael Malone is gonna be harping on this in training camp. He knows the math problem that they ran into last year. He understands all of it. He also understands to get through the Western Conference, if it's gonna be to beat the team you lost to last year, you're gonna have to space the floor. You're gonna have to take threes. You're gonna have to find it somewhere. And it's probably going to be Strawther. It's probably going to have to be a few other guys too. Christian Brown has been a relatively good three-point shooter over his first couple of years in the NBA, but he doesn't take them at a really high rate. He's probably going to have to, right? I think he'll be fine to do it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see who kind of takes those shots. I've got Dallas next.
Okay. They were a little high. I actually had them at 4th. I didn't feel great about it, but that's where I had them. So to me, that's a bet on. You've got Luka essentially guarantees your floor, Kyrie vaults your ceiling, and Klay Thompson stretches everything out wide. Talk to me about the Dallas Mavericks.
I'm looking at it and I feel like I should have put them higher. I've got, you know what? I'm going to move them one spot up, but we'll talk about them now. Look, they were 8th in offensive rating last year, 6th the year before that. Under Luka, it's very similar to all these other guys, like a Nikola Jokic thing. They're going to be an efficient offense no matter what. And you add Klay Thompson to the mix, you get a full year of real rim rolling with Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. We saw what that did to their offense last year. You have that. And then you also added Spencer Dinwiddie as another ball handler off the bench. I think that was sort of a quiet, good move for them to bolster their second unit and give them a little bit more depth in the backcourt there. But I just think that there's so many good offensive players. There's so much talent on this team. It's not amazing analysis. But I don't know that you need it when you look at the names on this roster. The thing I like about Dallas a lot over the last, I guess, calendar year is how much they've evolved. They have evolved into basically Luka or death to, okay, we've added Kyrie Irving. That's a great little amount of unpredictable dynamism to this offense. Something you can't really account for because you never really know what Kyrie Irving is going to do. You add guys like they were the most reliant team in the league on corner threes last year. No team took more of their threes from the corner than the Dallas Mavericks did last year. And as we saw in the finals, it got a little bit predictable. Yeah. And they didn't have a guy on the roster who could make an above the break three. Klay Thompson enters the chat. He can obviously make an above the break three. He's a great off ball mover and all these things also. So you just add like over the last couple of years now, they've just added more tools to the toolbox on offense that I love, and you've got Luka Doncic just sort of running the whole thing. He's at the command center, just sort of like pressing the different buttons. Okay, we need a corner three now. We need an above break three here. We got a rim roller here. He's a basketball genius, and I'm talking myself into them being higher on my own list. But I love everything about their offense.
Yeah, there's and even the sort of lower wattage pieces that they brought in can be useful in that way too. Like Quentin Grimes, when last he was a full-time player with the Knicks a couple of years ago, like was a legit corner shooter, right? Somebody that could knock down corner threes at decent volume. Najee Marshall, it remains to be seen if that, I think he was at 42% from the corners in New Orleans last year. Whether that is an outlier or that's the base, or the neighborhood he can be in, he's going to be getting room service from Kyrie and from Luka there. Nobody in the league has set up more corner threes than Luka last couple of years, so the deliveries are going to be there. It's going to be can you knock those shots down? And then with Klay, I think I have some concerns about what the defense looks like, moving him into the starting three role, and in all likelihood he's going to be guarding power forwards because they're going to have to juggle and cross match and get PJ Washington there. I think that there's going to be some stuff for Jason Kidd and Sean Sweeney, that staff, to figure out. But if what you are saying is we need someone to either draw attention away from off the ball, get eyes moving somewhere else so that you're not able to load up as effectively on Luka Doncic and on Kyrie Irving. Klay Thompson as an off-ball mover is still one of the most dangerous and scariest things in the league. And then if you're saying we just need somebody that we can feel consistently good about cashing out those catch-and-shoot threes, he has finished first or second in the NBA in catch-and-shoot threes 8 times in the last 11 seasons, including last year. So it is a hand-in-glove fit for what the structure of that offense can be. You combine that with just, again, I mean, the concern is, are you getting good availability from Kyrie? Last year, I think it was only 58 games, but 2,000 plus minutes. So like if you are getting relative availability and health from Kyrie, every version of like Luka on, Kyrie off, Kyrie on, Luka off, both of them on, all of that was like a 120 offensive rating and up. So to me, like the table stakes of what that offense should be is 6, 7, 8, and even like towards the end of the year when they went on their run and it was more fueled by defense, even with the lineups that were, Derek Jones Jr. and we're not having, sort of adjusting the sliders more towards stopping than to outscore you. Even that was like a 6th ranked offense after the trade deadline. So to me, I look at it and say, I think that just the fundamentals of that offense should be rock solid. And if there's concerns about slippage, to me, it's going to be more on the other end of the court. But you certainly have the firepower to extinguish some of those concerns. Speaking of concerns, all right, I'm going with my second big swing here.
Okay.
I have the Memphis Grizzlies at number 7.
I was wondering who you had at 7. All right. I like it.
And so this is not a rigorous analysis. 2 years ago, the last full, or not the last full healthy season. Yeah, the last season before the troubles started in Memphis, they were 4th. The season that Ja Morant got suspended, Steven Adams got hurt, Brandon Clark got hurt, they finished 11th. You kind of average out 4 and 11 and you get 7.5. But also, just generally speaking, this to me is a bet on, I think they realized without, like, obviously not having Ja Morant was the number one thing that led their offense to tank. I think they realized we really need a mauling center that is going to set screens, get people open, and hammer the offensive glass. Like we talked about the Knicks earlier and sort of their offensive identity being creating extra possessions, hammering the offensive glass, creating second chance points, kickouts for like spot up threes as guys keep moving, all that kind of stuff. The Grizzlies were, if not patient zero in that possession game, like Toronto was in that mix too, but they were one of the first teams that was like, if we just annihilate the glass, it makes up for our half court offense being a little bit dicey. I think Zach Edey is a very useful weapon, or at least has the capacity to be a very useful weapon in that, use case. And then if you get Clark, Clark came back healthy at the end of last season, sprinkle here or there. If you get him back to being able to play rotation minutes, both behind the Edey and then alongside Jaren Jackson Jr. in closing lineups, we have a proof of concept that looks really good. You bring back Ja Morant, obviously the, league leader in points in the paint. I think they went from leading the league in points in the paint for 4 straight years to finishing dead last year. My assumption is with Ja Morant back, that will change. And I have some interest. I think there's going to be some interesting, like, how does Taylor Jenkins juggle lineups to sort of like what you were talking about with Phoenix earlier, like where does Marcus Smart fit between Desmond Bane and Ja Morant? How do those guys work in combinations with like Luke Kennard off the bench? And, what are the mixes there in the front court? Are you trying to get more stretch and space by putting Santi Aldama next to Jaren Jackson Jr.? Like how do we sort of get the most out of these ingredients? But I think they have more ingredients than they've had in this Ja era. And the last times they've gotten mostly full seasons from him, they've won 56 and 51 games and been either solidly in the top 10 or close to it. So to me, it's a big bet on Edey, although as if you can make any other kind of bet. But it's also a bet that the work that Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., some of the rest of the guys in that roster put in last season to grow their games in the absence of Ja is going to pay off in like lower usage, less stressful possessions because he's able to create so much for everybody else. This could wind up being way off because, again, we were talking about a team that was, I think, if not dead last in the league in offensive efficiency last year, damn close to it. But I kind of think you wind up having to almost wad that up and throw it in the trash because the fun, like just like the basics of what you are doing with the Ja Morant roster is so dramatically different. And if he's healthy, I think you're going to see that early and often.
Yeah, last year doesn't even count. I thought about Memphis too. I looked where they were 4th in offensive rating in 2021, 2022. Their offensive rating was 114.3. That would not have been in the top 10.
True.
This last year. And even if Memphis gets to be as good as they were offensively 3 years ago, to me, they're a team that that's kind of the best case scenario, is that they can be as good as they were offensively 3 years ago. I don't see them being necessarily better or more efficient. I could be wrong, right? Obviously, they could find ways to be a little bit more efficient. They lose Dylan Brooks. They add Marcus Smart. They're both sort of defensive-minded, but also high-volume three-point shooters who are very streaky three-point shooters. But you don't lose a lot there. To me, the biggest loss is not even just like Steven Adams and these other guys, but it's Tyus Jones. Like when John Morant is off the court, or when he was off the court, I remember talking to the Grizzlies about it was John Morant was first suspended, and they went like on this like 3-1 stretch. Like they were pretty good right as John Morant got suspended the first time. And I remember talking to some of the guys on the team. I said, how are you doing this? And I remember it was Dylan Brooks just looked at me and he goes, Tyus Jones, that's how we're doing it. And they don't have him anymore.
That's
so
true.
I guess my fear is when John Morant is off the court, how do they generate consistent offense? It is a bet on Zach Edey, like you talked about. I'm glad you and I are both on the Zach Edey train, by the way. I love that pick for them. I think it's exactly what you need to put John Morant next to. I think they're going to crush the boards. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff to like about Memphis's offense. Now that we're talking about them, I feel like they should have been more of an honorable mention. I couldn't get them into my top 10.
Yeah, I mean,
but I like
only 10 spots. It's completely defensible to say like I kind of need to see those things line up the right way. I think my glass half full take on the non-Ja minutes is when he was pressed into duty as a lead ball handler last year. Like Dylan Brooks was playing like at a near all-star level on a absolute dog water team for half the season before he got hurt again. But like he had to do a lot more creation. Jaren Jackson Jr. had to do a lot more individual creation. So if you're Taylor Jenkins, who basically also like completely revamped the coaching staff this summer with bringing in assistants with an eye on how do we implement some more 5-out? Are there ways we can do 5-out with a more traditional giant big? Are there, how can, you mentioned some of the Mike Budenholzer stuff earlier of like, we're taping boxes on the court and saying, if you stand here, even if it's not like traditional 5-out, we're going to get some of those bonuses. Like, I think there might be some more creativity to the way Memphis operates offensively. And I do think that if you're able to stagger some lineups and say, Smart's out there with Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. or whatever as like a second unit with multiple guys who can create. I'm also like one of my hobby horses, and it's a dopey one, but whatever. It's, we're talking about nerdy stuff. They got like maybe 100 minutes. It was not very much at all of Ja with Kennard and Bane when they first made that deal and brought Kennard over from the Clippers before Ja got suspended. And we have never seen Ja play with multiple shooters like that. Mm-hmm. And I think you might pay a price defensively. I think you might not be able to get to that look all that often, but but they scored like 1.4 points per possession with those guys on the court. And I think the idea of get more shooters out there with him, as basic as it is, like no one stays in front of him. And if they have to, if you have to sink off and you got two of those guys out there, it's bombs away. So I am optimistic about the possibilities for what that could look like. But it's still a long way to go to get into that top mix.
Should also mention Gigi Jackson's hurt. That doesn't exactly help, but he should come back and, whatever. I don't know how much of a difference that makes in overall offensive rating by the time we get back to the end of the year.
Today's episode of RealGM Radio is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. You want to play Prize Picks alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, MMA champion Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Download the Prize Picks app today, use the code CLNS, and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game.
Number 5, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah.
You have the same thing?
I had them at 2, but
you have them at 2. Okay. Well, I'll tell you why I have them dropping, because they were 3rd in offensive rating last year. I have them falling a couple of spots. And this is mostly just 3-point shooting. That's the argument here. They were number 1 in the regular season in 3-point shooting, almost 39% making their threes. The playoffs, that dropped closer to 35%. They were more middle of the pack. I think that feels more about where they're going to be. It always was a little smoke and mirrors to me with the 39% 3-point shooting last year. Adding Alex Caruso helps for overall percentage. It doesn't help in volume. We're going to see more 2 big looks, obviously, with Isaiah Hartenstein. I think Hartenstein is going to help them with the second chance points, and that can maybe even out some of the loss from the 3-point shooting that I just think is naturally going to happen. My biggest question for them is their best 5-man units don't really feature any of their really great 3-point shooters. And that's kind of the thing that I can't get over. I still have them top 5 offense. Like, they still have SGA, Jalen Williams, Chet. Again, Hartenstein on the boards is going to really help create some extra possessions for them. And it just feels like that team in a chaos scenario is going to be a nightmare. That's the word I always used for the Thunder, by the way, last year, is that they're terrifying. Just everybody on the court can dribble and score and punish you. And they're still the same way, plus 2 more guys who help them do that. So I think they're going to be a good offense. This is more just accounting for maybe a little bit of slippage in 3-point shooting.
Totally defensible. I had that as one of like the potential caveat for me on them was like a lot of their guys, and then specifically Jalen Williams and Lou Dort, had like giant leaps in their 3-point accuracy last year. And so is that an outlier? The potential caveat to my caveat, if that makes sense, is this is also like a year downstream from hiring Chip Engelland away from the Spurs. And maybe what we're seeing is shot doctors. You know, we've seen Fred Vincent have this impact in New Orleans and hopefully now in Detroit. Like, the right shot doctor maybe can make some significant impact. So like maybe this is development work as opposed to total outlier. But even if Jalen Williams shoots 54% from the field and 43% from 3, that would be obviously welcome, but I think it would be a little bit of a surprise. If Lou Dort's a 39% 3-point shooter on 6 a game or whatever it is, that would be a bit of a surprise. So I get what you're saying there. To me, it's a bet on all of their top 8 scorers from last year were 25 or under. And while development or progress isn't linear, I think it is not unreasonable to say like maybe those guys can all many of those guys can continue to grow and develop and get better. I think there's a reasonable shot. They wind up with 3 All-Stars in SGA, Chet, and Jalen Williams. The only things they were not good at on offense last year were offensive rebounding and 3-point frequency. Out goes Josh Giddey, who, fine rebounder for a, wing point forward, but in comes Hartenstein, who was second in the league in offensive rebounding rate last season, as you mentioned. So I think that's like a potential area of growth for them where you really turn a weakness into, if not like an overall strength, because I don't think they're going to be like bombs away on the glass. I think they're still going to want to get back in transition and, have floor balance. But if you can go from being one of the, worst or bottom 5, bottom 10 teams in creating second chances to middle of the pack or near top 10, like that has a potential to really, really boost you. And you mentioned like Caruso is he's not going to shoot like 11 threes per game, but Giddey was, I think, around like 4.5 per 36, and Caruso's like 6. So the idea being, if he's just like more willing and then also better at it, like I think he shot like 41% from 3. So where your like lowest volume, least accurate shooter was, there will be more times where that guy is going to be replaced by someone who is more willing and more accurate, and or someone who's going to find other ways to efficiently generate scoring chances. And so I think those guys, and then the other part of this, I know we're not talking about defense specifically, but the Thunder were awesome at generating turnovers and getting out in transition. And then they added guys who were like elite at block and steal rates to create more chaos. And so if you have like your offensive rebounding's better, you have more, now fewer weak spots in shooting, and you're generating more transition opportunities where you are already like a top 10 scoring offense on the break. Like, there's more opportunities to efficiently generate points. I think there is a chance. I had to kind of pump the brakes and not put them even higher than this, but I think that there's a chance that what we saw last year is less like the 99th percentile outcome for them and more like this is what this talent and structure and system is going to generate from here on out.
I love it. I love that you're this high on the Thunder. Look, The Giddey point is great because you take him off the court all of a sudden, and now you're not playing off of anybody. And maybe you play off of Hartenstein now that you have maybe two bigs, you can cram the paint a little bit more, but you don't. If that becomes a problem, you don't have to do it. That's the great part about how the Thunder are built. It's like, hey, this isn't working. You still have a bunch of wings and guys who can dribble, penetrate, kick out, obviously shoot threes and stuff like that. I think Caruso, being coached by Mike Dagnall, is going to put up more threes. I think it's fair to say he wasn't in the most creative situation in Chicago the last few years. With Mike Dagnall, he's like, hey, man, Shea's doing all the work. He's going to drive and kick. Just stand out here and shoot the threes. I think we're going to see a jump in his volume overall. I have no problem with them being up there. And I might be a little too low on them, and I might just be looking at that 3-point percentage and just kind of penciling that in as going down and assuming that the Thunder are just going to go down too. But the Hartenstein thing is so interesting to see how this plays out, especially if they play these two big lineups, because they were in the bottom of the league in offensive rebounding rate last year. They were near the bottom of the league in second chance points. The Knicks with Hartenstein were 1 or 2 in second chance points last year. And that was a lot of Hartenstein. It was a lot of Josh Hart. It was a lot of the other guys, but it was a lot of Hartenstein. You just add that element and put him on the Thunder. You kind of copy and paste him onto Oklahoma City's roster. And that rate is going to jump up a lot. And this team just, whatever they don't get from, I guess, not having like a Steph Curry level 3-point shooter or just some high volume 3-point shooter, they're so elite at everything else in terms of generating those in between points with the second chance points. You already mentioned creating turnovers, getting easy offense that way. There's just so many ways, in other words, for this team to score, and that's why they're terrifying. I've got the 76ers 4th, and I'm not sure you have them on your top 10 if I'm looking at your list here.
That's true. I don't. They were, if I was to do the honorable mentions, they would have been there. And so this is partially a bet, or I keep saying that, but this is I am somewhat skeptical that we are going to get, either for injury or for maintenance, a whole lot of Joel Embiid next year. And if we are not getting a whole lot of Joel Embiid next year, this feels more like they finished 15th last year with not a whole lot of Joel Embiid. Obviously, you bring in Paul George, and he's going to make an impact there, but I don't know that bringing in Paul George next to Tyrese Maxey, if you don't get a ton of Embiid, is going to make you vault you from like 15 to 5. So that, to me, that was my sort of gamble there, where I'm looking at it and saying, I like the talent on this team a lot. And I think that there's a lot of ways this team can play that could be very effective. I just don't know that I don't know that they're going to hang their hat on being like a dominant offense night in and night out, but I'm open to the possibility of hearing why they will be.
So they were 6th in offensive rating before Embiid got hurt last year, and he is so dominant offensively. Yeah. I think you got another year of Embiid with Tyrese Maxey. They're developing a good two-man game, and that chemistry is awesome. This is a bet on Embiid, actually the opposite of what you're saying. It's like a bet on Embiid just being a little bit more healthy than he was last regular season. And so, yeah, the 76ers are sort of like, they got a pretty high ceiling. They obviously have a really low floor. It all depends on Embiid's health, which you can't really bet on. But and then you add Paul George to the mix. He is so efficient. It's all the stuff we talked about with the Clippers part of this. But you add him, and even if Embiid does miss a couple of games here and there, and they do a little bit of maintenance with him, you still got Tyrese Maxey and Paul George as a sort of 1-2 punch offensively, which I think is really going to work. They add Eric Gordon to the mix, Caleb Martin. I just like the way they filled out the roster. It's going to be just a lot of guys who could play off of their stars. So I like everything about the Sixers team. I also admittedly have kind of just been like, the 76ers are my kryptonite, where I always want to believe in them. It's like the opposite of the Clippers for me, which is like, you can't show me anything that'll make me believe. The 76ers could just give me like a little bit of hope, and I'll buy all the way in. I'll just start buying up stock. And I don't know why it is, but it's so. So
no,
that's why
it's total. Like, listen, like, you don't have to do a hard sell on Joel Embiid plus Tyrese Maxey plus Paul George as a top 10 offense. Like, I think that is a very justifiable way to look at it. Just to me, like, that's Embiid played, I think, in his most healthy season the last couple of years. It's like 66 games, 68 games. I kind of feel like, and this is based on no individual reporting, I think they're going to look at it and say, like, all right, you've won the MVP, you have made all NBA teams, you've gotten to these like, at this point, we just need to have you healthy in April. So
Right.
if that means we're planning to have you below the 65 game threshold for awards, like the goal is that, maybe we make it up to you by extending you for as much as we possibly can, as early as we possibly can, like right now. And we, whatever, but like that, I think the idea is going to be keep him under wraps. If he plays 55 games, but he's healthy in April, then everybody's happy. But if he only plays 55 games, then yeah, to me, like 11th or 12th seems more reasonable than 3rd, 4th, 5th.
I've got the Pacers second on my list. They were second last year. They're basically the same team. You're getting a full year of Pascal Siakam now. And this, I had a hard time not putting them number one. This offense is awesome. It's Tyrese Halliburton. He's presumably healthy. You got him, a full year of Siakam. Rick Carlisle's an offensive genius. They've doubled down on everything that made them good last year. They re-signed Obi Toppin. They re-signed TJ McConnell. The confidence that this team is going to play with after making the conference finals last year, I think the Pacers are going to win a ton of games in the East next year, and their offense is going to be the biggest part of it. I've got them second. I saw no reason to move them down.
Yeah, I moved him up to 1.
Okay, I thought you might have.
We're kind of in lockstep here. To me, they scored at a top 6 rate even with Halliburton off the floor.
Yeah.
So what their season was when Halliburton was healthy, where they were before he got hurt, they were comfortably number 1 and comfortably in that. And obviously there was the questions about like the juiced ball era. And then all of a sudden the way that the game was being called changed and offense drift. But even within that, Halliburton was maybe I think had a good case for best offensive player in the league. If not like maybe not named Jokic, or just in general before he got hurt. And then even after his injury, they were still an excellent offense, and they scored at a top 6 clip with him off the floor. Tyrese Halliburton for the final 35 games of last year shot 32% from 3 as he was working his way back from the hamstring injury. He obviously had some big performances in the playoffs. I don't believe that he's going to keep shooting like that. I don't believe that. I mean, obviously there was reporting that he was dealing with something at the Olympics, and that was part of why he didn't play big minutes. And we'll see how healthy he is coming the season. If I'm going on the assumption that the Halliburton we're getting at the start of the season is roughly the one that we got at the start of last season, with a full season, as you mentioned, of Siakam, who averaged like 22 a game on 600 true shooting after he came over, the Pacers in the minutes with Halliburton and Siakam on the floor in the playoffs, 128.7 offensive rating. So they were like scorching now granted, they played some injury laden teams as they went along, but even so, when they had their 2 main guys on the court in the playoffs, they were absolutely lights out, better even than they were at the beginning of the season when they were setting records. So to me, it's a full off season to work that out, to find new wrinkles in it, to introduce new ways to create problems, get Siakam, shots in places that he's more comfortable, all that kind of stuff. Like it screams, this is going to be, it has the potential to be the best offense in the league. And then the other side of it, and this is that I think they're going to have to, because even the best case scenario to me for that Pacers defense, even with the structure of it, is like 20th, 21st, 22nd. And if that's what you're dealing with in terms of giving stuff up, I think that you are going to have to win a lot of shootouts. And I think they are extremely well equipped to do it.
They are the Miami Dolphins of the NBA, right? They have the crazy offense that you can't really account for until you see it. Like Mike McDaniel running and every year they're going to every week it seems like, okay, we got this new wrinkle, we got this new thing. And they were doing that on the fly last year. And now they have a whole summer and a whole training camp with Siakam there for Rick Carlisle to do his genius work on offense and figure things out. One of my favorite Pacers stats from last year, they had the number 1 offensive rating in the league in the 3rd quarter last year by a pretty wide margin. And that's important. And this is more anecdotal, but like the Warriors, when they were blowing the doors off everybody, were always the best 3rd quarter team in the league. And they would just put pedal to the metal when they started the second half. The Pacers also were the number 1 4th quarter offense in the league last year too. Like I said at the top of this, I really wanted to move them into number 1. I really want them to be number 1. There's a great chance that they do end up number 1, but I just couldn't get there because if the Pacers are the Miami Dolphins of the NBA, then the Boston Celtics are the Kansas City Chiefs. And they're a well-oiled machine. They have Jason Tatum. They have Jaylen Brown. They have Derek White. They have Joe Mazzulla's 5-out system. There's so much shooting. They are going to do so much shooting. It's just it's structurally so perfect to be a number one offense. I know they're going to be without Kristaps Porzingis for a couple of months here. I just think by the end of the year, they're going to move up offensive rating. I think the argument against Boston would be like, they're just not going to play as hard because it's the regular season. They already proved it. But like, to me, that might impact defensively their rating. I don't really see it impacting their offense that much. I think they're going to actually rely on their offense more to win games, do it the fun way, as opposed to like trying to like hammer out a good defense every single night. But they go ahead.
Sorry, your argument that they might take it easy in any capacity feels like one that does not consider Joe Mazzulla's whole thing. I don't know that I can see a world in which the Celtics don't operate at all times like someone has a knife to their throat, metaphorically or literally. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how it's all going to work, but like this man is already coming out here talking about how in the animal kingdom, you're not defending anything, you're attacking constantly. It's September and he's like already going right back to Joey quotes. So I think that
talking about orcas, like I'm just like, yeah, let's go.
100%. Yeah. So, I mean, it's actually maybe better for everybody that, I guess, I mean, Boston is a fairly caffeinated place because of the Dunkin' Donuts of it all. But like, if you had Missoula in Miami with like cafecitos and cocaine, I think it would be a bad mix. Everybody would just be losing their minds, like constantly amped on 1,000 at every opportunity. Yeah, I mean, the only reason that I bumped Boston down from 1 to 2 is just like, if you are without Porzingis for an extended period, it caps your ceiling to some degree. That's
longer 5 out.
Yeah, or if you're 5 out with Horford in one version of it, and then like Luke Cornett or Xavier Tillman or Neemias Queta in other versions of it, and that's just like a little, obviously, certainly less potent and can be defended a little bit differently. That said, it is absolutely worth noting that like when they were without Porzingis last year, when he was off the court, still like a 124 offensive rating in the regular season, and then like 119 in the playoffs, which was still like top 6 level. So to me, this is like a split the difference of, I think they're still going to be awesome. It wouldn't surprise me if that came down a little bit. And then like the inverse of my argument with Indiana, where I think they're going to have to score like that in a lot of games. I think the Celtics, with that defense and with the personnel they've got, the scheme they've got, I think they're going to be better equipped to lean on stops as a means of getting wins than saying we got to be this, like relentlessly efficient, putting up 150 every night kind of thing. So, but yeah, to me, I think they are that's the top of the league to me in terms of offense. I think it's going to be Indy and it's going to be Boston. I'm with you in that I think that there's a chance that we are painting the Pacers with the Trae Young Hawks brush a little too early. I think that the idea that they got there, but they had favorable matchups and there were some injuries along the way and there was some smoke and mirrors and they got there. I think that underestimates what the fundamentals of the Pacers are. And I think they're going to be really friggin' good. And I think if they're going to be really friggin' good, it's going to be because they have the best offense in the league.
We agree. So just to recap, my top 10, then we'll get your top 10 for a quick recap. I've got the Celtics number 1, the Pacers number 2. Then I have the Phoenix Suns, the 76ers, the Thunder, the Mavericks, the Nuggets, the Bucks, the Kings, and then the Clippers at 10. And your top 10 was?
I'm also hoping that I have this written down right based on what we said. Pacers 1, Thunder 2, Celtics 3, Mavs 4, Nuggets 5, Bucks 6, Grizzlies 7. I'm sorry, I'm laughing as I get down to the bottom of my top 10. Grizzlies 7, Suns 8, Charlotte Hornets, your Charlotte Hornets at 9, and New York Knicks at 10. I know why I did what I did, but I'm a little bit ashamed of myself. But I guess maybe not be. But maybe that's just sort of the general operating vibe I bring through most of what I do. At the end of it, I'm like, no, I probably shouldn't have done that. Welcome to a career. There we go.
Dan Devine, you are great at what you do. You could read them over at Yahoo Sports, the No Cap Room podcast, the Divine Intervention podcast, everything you've got going at Yahoo. You're a must follow on Twitter, X, whatever platform it is. Thanks so much for joining me, man. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, man. Thanks so much for having me, Wes. I had a blast.